Welcome. I'm Susan Noyes, founder and chief visionary officer of Make It Better Media Group, which includes Better Magazine and the Make It Better Foundation. We're delighted that you joined us for Tips for Investing with Impact with Kathy Roser and Emily Thomas of Morgan Stanley. Please send any questions or comments you have at any time through the chat, and we will try to get to all of them. But also, please know that this video will be in MIB TV on YouTube and included in an article summarizing our top line tips, which will be included in an upcoming Better Letter, our bi-weekly email newsletter. And if you haven't subscribed to our Better Letter yet, we strongly encourage you to do so. Now, I am honored to be able to introduce Kathy and Emily to you. Kathy Roser is a wealth advisor, managing director, and founder of the Roser Barbente Group at Morgan Stanley. For over 30 years, she has been helping successful executives and multi-generational families build and protect their wealth. She's been consistently named to Forbes' Best in State Wealth Advisors, Top Women Wealth Advisors, and Barron's Top Financial Advisors and Top 100 Women Advisors. Kathy lives in Chicago and Park City, Utah, is married with two sons, two dogs, and a fabulous new daughter-in-law. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Roser.
Great to be here, Susan. Thank you. So what we'd like to talk today is really about investing with impact. And investing with impact is actually quite simple. It's really about helping our clients to meet not only their financial goals, but also their environmental and social goals. And we broadly refer to that as impact and goals. It's all about aligning your money with your values in order to have impact. So we call it money, values, and impact. And it really used to be something nice to have, a luxury some of our clients were focused on, but largely not on the radar for most of our clients. And this has changed over the last few years, really in a world that we've had a global health crisis, we've had social unrest and extreme weather conditions across the world. It's really made a lot of people think about the way we live our lives and about our future. And it's also changed the way some people have thought about how they look at their investments and their financial legacy. And we've seen a lot of accelerating interest in how people can use their wealth to really drive a positive impact. And Emily, maybe you can talk about how the demand for investing has, with impact, has picked up some momentum over the years.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. And first, it's so wonderful to be here with you all. And Kathy, a longtime partner. I'm Emily Thomas. I am a senior leader on the Investing with Impact team at Morgan Stanley, but my career really started outside of financial services. I was actually, I lived and worked in Ecuador, primarily working with Colombian refugees. And one of the focuses that I had was doing a needs-based assessment. So understanding what their needs were and where they were being met and where they weren't. And one of the issues that kept coming up over and over again, was lack of access to jobs. And I saw the impact that a microloan had on this group of women artisans and their ability to start a business, support their family, and really see a better future for themselves. And give them hope that maybe they hadn't had before. And I started thinking, what is this? Sustainable investing, impact investing, maybe under this broader umbrella that Kathy really just laid out. And so, fast forward a number of years, I've now spent over a decade in the financial services industry, really trying to do that, bring that impact side to finance. And I think what continues to drive and motivate me, I have a young son at home, and thinking about what future there is for him, and ensuring and doing my best, at least, to kind of work to help ensure that there is a positive future forward for the next generation. But to Kathy's point, Morgan Stanley puts out a survey on a regular basis, really looking at where there's demand around sustainable investing, both from our clients, but also investors more broadly. And we've seen that number and the demand continue to grow. And so today, it's actually a roughly 99% of millennials who say they care about environmental and social data in their portfolio. 99%. So that's the next generation. That's who's going to be taking over the capital going forward. And we see over, almost 90%, over 80% of investors broadly. This is something that's very important to them. And so I think generally, we've seen that number grow. And if we're not thinking about that population, like we're missing out, but B, I think more and more it's showing the importance of why financial services needs to think about this, but also companies, because consumers and investors really care. And the other thing, it's just, drilling down into that number, where we're seeing the greatest demand is consistently around climate and diversity and inclusion. And I think, Kathy touched on some of the challenges that are really right in our face. And I think that have been, spurred some of that demand and interest, is particularly around climate. But yeah, it's a great question.
It really gives me hope for the future to know, Emily, that you saw the effect of microloans from your work elsewhere, and it brought you to a place like Morgan Stanley, what's very intentional, making the most impact you can. And I love that Kathy Roser was the very first financial expert that my company worked with to bring the concept of impact investing to us. I remember she walked in about a decade ago, maybe more, with a woman whose position I think that you've just taken over, who just said, the Rockefellers, the next generation of the Rockefellers really believe in this concept, and we do too. So it is an honor to be working with both of you now to talk about where impact investing is at this time and your best tips for our audience. But I'd still like to hear how you define impact investing at this time. Kathy, do you want to go first?
So, yeah, I'll take that one. I think when we think about impact investing, I'll tell you, not one size fits all. And I think it varies across investors about the way that they think about having impact. And so at Morgan Stanley, we tried to put some thought process or framework around this, and to take, which I would say is fairly complex and very many ways to look at it. We call it the 3 I's of impact investing. And if you think about it in this way, that the 3 approaches would be, by being intentional about your investment process. And that would mean you're going to reduce exposure to companies that you might find objectionable, or seek out companies that you think can generate positive impact in what ways you define it. So that's the first side, really being intentional about it. But then you can also try to work towards a framework of influencing. And that would focus, I think, as a shareholder or an investor, on playing a role in change of way corporations might be trying to drive positive outcomes. And then the last one is inclusion. And that would be to consider the level of diversity along the asset management firms or investment portfolio managers or approaches that you have in your portfolio. So let me just frame an example, because I can make it come to life in that way. But in the intentionality, I've had clients who've been pretty upset about the uptick in school shootings. And so to drive impact and being intentional about it, they've screened out gun companies from their portfolio. Or if they're concerned with, or they want to be able to help in the area for more equality, they have looked for ways to fund tax-exempt bonds for affordable housing in underserved communities. And then in the area of, I would call, engagement or influence, they seek out money managers that really broad range, have a mandate to do things that are good for the environment and the social awareness of driving that. So those are like examples. And maybe Emily, did you have any to add on to
Yeah,
that?
I was gonna say, I think on the influence part and engagement part, I think that's one thing that you can actually see in your daily lives. So just a few, examples of what some of the asset managers we partner with are doing. I use Uber a fair amount. I live in a city, and one thing I've noticed is Uber has actually recently been, giving me notifications. I can get deals for taking electric vehicles and really encouraging more use of electric vehicles. One of our asset managers actually engaged to spur Uber to do that. And so that change that affects you personally and, can have a much bigger impact and you can see in your daily lives can come directly from your investments. And one other that I just thought I would share recently, I don't know if anyone else on the call, but has ever had overdraft fees at their bank. I certainly have, thinking back to my college days, we've seen, but the thing about overdraft fees, I was in college and it was something I was able to overcome pretty easily. But actually, the vast majority, in fact, 70% of overdraft fees are charged to people making less than $50,000 a year. And so it's disproportionately impacting lower income communities. It's disproportionately impacting communities of color. And so what an asset manager did was go and show the data and work with two large banks to say, hey, this is an issue. How can we think about shifting this practice? And they lowered their fee structure. So whether lowering the amount that they're charging or the frequency that they charge those fees. So again, things that you're seeing in your daily life that our investors are having an impact with.
Emily, I have a question about that. As an individual investor who, even if my portfolio includes Uber, my portfolio at Morgan Stanley includes Uber, would I know that Morgan Stanley had used, that aggravated, I was part of that aggregate and the policies were changed around that? Does that get communicated back to your investors?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's something that we're working on. So we think about like impact reporting, because it's not just because you're invested in Uber that you're a part of that, proactive influence. It has to be an intentional focus of the asset manager you're investing in. And so one thing is, if you're working with a financial advisor, is to talk to them and say, these are issues that I care about. And they can help make sure that those stories are being filtered through to you. And then the other way is thinking about that impact reporting. And so many asset managers create impact reports where they share stories of the engagements they're having and the intentional impact. And so like decisions they're making to invest in companies that are improving the environment or society more broadly. But raising your hand and saying, hey, I wanna see that, I think is really important, because I agree. It's like, how do you ensure you're aware? And then I think just going back to, when you're making the investment decisions and working with an advisor or, making, whoever you're partnering with on that, deciding what, looking at what the asset manager has historically done. And so you can partner and invest through asset managers and funds that historically have been engaging, because then that that's something they're going to continue to do on your behalf.
And this is,
And
I'm sorry. Are you talking then about investing in a fund that has a very specific ESG screen as opposed to picking your own stock?
Yes, I'm talking about a fund. And sorry, Kathy, you were going to say something.
Yes, Kathy.
Oh, I was just going to add on that we have something at Morgan Stanley called Morgan Stanley Impact Quotient, which we're going to show you the link to. But basically, this is a way you can screen your existing portfolio and look at what you're doing, and then it'll give you feedback and somewhat of a report to see if what you outline as your values are aligned with the way that you're investing. And to add on to that, Emily, I think, is talking about funds, but there's also ways where you can pick individual stocks and screen out your approach about intentionally what you want to do in certain areas. And we even have the technology and managers that'll even take a broad S&P 500 index fund, where it's been a very popular way to invest with index fund of let's say the S&P or the NASDAQ, and where you can screen out companies that you feel don't align with your values. So I think that's what you were asking.
Kathy, it does seem that there's a range of approaches to integrating environmental and social data into investments. What are some of the different approaches you have seen investors take in aligning their portfolio to their impact goals?
So I would give an example of, sitting down and talking about, where we outline different ways you can think about that. I've had a client that was very focused on animal welfare. I have a client who's been involved in thinking about what they can do in the climate change area. I've done things in the area of racial equality. And so once we have those ideas, we can then help a client understand the companies that are focused in doing those things in those areas that they're concerned of. A lot of times, I think clients just want to be educated, and it's a process that takes many years to get there. And sometimes it's just education, and then you can build from there.
It has to feel so satisfying, though, to understand the impact you are making and you're helping your clients make. You are analyzing all these societal issues. That's fantastic. That's important educational work. Emily, could you add your perspective on this too?
Yes. So I think we see clients think about this in a range of ways. And I think Kathy really laid it out beautifully. But, in thinking about, your own portfolio, you can think about just taking, a sliver of the portfolio and really aligning it, that piece of it to, your impact objectives. You can think about using it as a lens to look at your entire portfolio. And to Kathy's point, you can look at restricting out securities. So that can be a first step. And, thinking about, you don't want exposure to certain areas, and tools like Morgan Stanley Impact Quotient can help let you know where you do have exposure. So being able to dive in and see an X-ray of your portfolio based on your own goals and values, and really show you, okay, you have exposure to guns today. Let's see how we can take that out of the portfolio. Or you are really aligned to, climate issues, but maybe your alignment to something around gender equality is not as great as you would like. How can you think about then better aligning to those impact objectives over time through your security selection or fund selection? And so we see clients with a range of impact goals, but it's about really kind of being able to see that, that X-ray of your own portfolio and how aligned it is to those impact objectives that are important to you.
So there's been a flurry of articles about how successful or authentic the funds are. Could you please give us your perspective on impact investing funds in particular?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here, Susan. I mean, we have seen a huge growth in the number of strategies of funds coming to market claiming ESG integration. And so I think it makes sense that we're seeing increased scrutiny in the media and from regulators really saying, show me that you're really having that authentic impact. And I think for us, what's been great is we have a decade of experience with this. The Investing with Impact platform launched in 2012. And so over that time, we've been able to develop a really fine-toothed approach to our due diligence. And so being able to look at, the strategies, making sure that one, they have a documented approach. And so I think that's, the number one focus that we have is ensuring that the fund is documenting how they're thinking about environmental and social factors and governance factors, and then how they're actually implementing that and ensuring they're implementing that consistently. We're looking at the team. Do they have an experienced team around, that understands the environmental, social, governance risks and opportunities, and how to then engage with companies on those? We are looking at ultimately the resulting alignment too. So thinking about, does so the firm says, or the fund says that they're doing this, but what does that look like on a tool like Morgan Stanley IQ? Are we able, is that aligned? They say they care about climate. Does that show up in the data? And sometimes there's misalignment in the data. And what it is that the asset manager isn't necessarily investing in those, best in class companies, but they're investing in those companies that can improve along, over time, and that are willing to engage. And then they're engaging with the company saying, hey, you don't have the best risk controls in place around your fossil fuel extraction process. That could actually be really costly. Here's some, ways you can think about limiting that risk early on. And how are you thinking about your board composition to ensure that you have the right people in place to help you make those decisions going forward? And so I think that seeing that full story can be a really helpful way to kind of get a broader picture. And then finally, we're looking at how they're actually measuring themselves. And so they say climate's important. What are the metrics they're using, the fund is using, to really measure their own, impact and ensure that they're keeping to those goals? And then how are they ultimately reporting that out, to your question earlier, Susan, to their investors through impact reporting?
Great. Kathy, I'm sure you have some experience advocating for investing funds for clients in various funds. Can you talk about your experience and your lens on that?
Yes, definitely, Susan. So I always start out with having people think about their goals and how it really fits into their overall financial picture. And sometimes people think they need to sacrifice their financial goals in order to reach and invest according to whatever their values are. And so it can be either focusing on income or growth. There's many ways to do that. And so when you just really outline those, I would just then drill down on finding the right asset managers to help you do that for you, building upon what Emily said, and then taking a step back and say, okay, am I doing this in the right areas? And again, it can be where you just broad base approach it and just say, I'm just going to, in a big picture, invest in an ESG fund. Or it just might be saying, I'm going to take my traditional approach of how I'm investing and say, I would like to make sure I exclude certain things from it. And then the exciting part, I remember somebody that lived in a state near us and really wanted to do something to help support in the municipal bond area, their community. So they looked for ways to fund in the affordable area of housing and put money in to support those tax-free muni bonds. So that was one of the most exciting ones I've seen recently.
And has that been successful? My husband and I actually used bond funds back in the day to improve affordable housing, and I hadn't heard anything about that for decades. So this is intriguing to me. Can you?
Yeah, and it's actually a fund puts you in a portfolio with a lot of other people. There's a way you can build that out depending on minimums, where you can actually own the individual bonds and be a part of what's funding that municipality or whatever you had. And that's just something that we've done probably in the last 4 years. I mean, that's kind of new to the area. But again, it's been very intentional and saying there's ways to support in different areas based upon whatever the need is.
It's an exciting concept. So the United Nations is about to host their 27th Climate Change Conference from November 6th to 18th. It's more commonly referred to as COP27. And just minutes before we started our show, NBC News headline popped up that we are farther away than ever from the goal set by the Paris Climate Accord. I think we have 43%, we still have 43% of the way to go, and we're actually 10% behind where we were supposed to be. Could you please talk about the opportunities for investors to consider climate action in their portfolio? And is there anything even more timely and compelling than sustainability and climate?
Again, Sue, it's the top focus of many of our clients. And so completely agree, very timely topic. And, I think we touched on some of these, but there are a range of approaches to thinking about this. And what's really exciting is there is innovation, because it's going to take policy, it's going to take government coming in, it's going to take businesses, and it's going to take investors, and all working together to really solve some of these big issues that are right in our face. And I think, you can think about from your portfolio perspective, on one end, kind of mitigating risks. And so you could think about like avoiding fossil fuel exposure. And again, to Kathy's point earlier, that's something you can just look at your portfolio and then kind of restrict out certain securities. But you can also think about investing in opportunities, companies that are actually creating new technologies, such as renewable energy and alternative energy sources more broadly. We're going to need batteries to spur and help with the energy transition. And the interesting thing too, going back to how you were talking about muni bonds, like these opportunities aren't limited to the equity side of your portfolio. A number of years ago, green bonds were launched. And so you can actually think about supporting specific projects at companies that are helping them make this transition. So maybe they're changing their fleet over to electric vehicles, or maybe they're building out renewable infrastructure. Actually, some of the biggest, like Amazon and some of these big companies out there, use renewable energy to power their servers, and have helped spur innovation in the renewable energy industry. We're seeing innovation in the private markets too, around, taking carbon out of the atmosphere. So trying to reverse some of the impacts of climate change that we've seen. But I think there are a myriad of ways. And just one other point to how you framed it, Sue, which I thought was such a great way, is there anything more important? Increasingly, we're seeing this intersectionality of climate change and social issues. And so, in front of New York Times a few months ago, it's talking about how lower income communities are actually statistically significantly hotter, a few degrees hotter than wealthier communities. And a big piece of it is that they have a lot more asphalt, over there, whereas wealthier communities are going to have a lot more trees taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. But I think just thinking about the broad impact that you can have in your portfolio by thinking about climate and thinking about the risks and opportunities is really exciting.
I agree. Kathy, your insights on this, please.
So I would say that, take a step back and know what you own, and think about all your assets, from your retirement assets to your investment portfolio, and know what's important to you, and tools that can help you think about the framework about what you're doing. And then that way you can see if your investments align with what is most important to you about your money, your values, and the impact that you want.
But how about specifically around sustainability? How much are your clients coming to you and saying sustainability and the climate is a top line issue?
I'm seeing it more and more. I see more of it with more of my younger clients, and I'm talking about in the children of my clients, that they're more concerned, because I think what they're doing is they're thinking about what the world will look like when and that could be 20, 30, 40 years from now. And that's where I see one interesting 401k plans, which is when somebody signs up for retirement and they're putting money away into their plans, that I'm seeing more of an investment sleeve that allows them to do something with an ESG overlay versus just more of a broad base.
Just to jump in.
That's one of the more interesting things that I'm seeing.
Yes. No, just to jump in on that, Kathy, because I think that's such an important one. And just in terms of know what you own, I think for a lot of investors, much of their wealth and assets are in their retirement funds or 401k funds. And the CFA Society recently came out with a study that shows that retirement accounts actually have a higher carbon footprint than other investments. I can, Sue, I'll send it around afterwards. I don't know if we're able to share it more broadly, but I think it's a really interesting, perspective of, yeah, we just click a button, we're just going in and it's like, yes, put me in the target date fund for my year. But I think just knowing what you own, knowing that there are options out there is just the first step. So just echoing what Kathy said.
Well, and that sounds like a wonderful education opportunity to educate all investors about the, oh my goodness, biggest carbon footprint in the 401ks. That's an issue.
I think you go on
Emily,
to our
okay.
websites, you can find the websites that we've posted here really will help you then think about that and more in a step-by-step approach too.
Can we also speak to diversity? You know, I believe that we are trying to be more intentionally diverse companies and human beings across our country. How are you seeing that reflected in your work with investors? And how can investors think about supporting their intentional, inclusive attitudes?
Yeah. So, again, here, there's a range of approaches to take. And so, one way is to just think about restricting out companies in the portfolio that have lagging, diversity track records. So maybe, whether they don't have policies in place to support an inclusive culture, or they have poor records in terms of their actual diverse representation. But that's one approach. But you can also think again about investing in opportunities, and solutions aimed at really addressing some of the needs of more of diverse communities. So thinking about something like a low income or affordable housing project. And what's really exciting, just going back to the story Kathy was sharing, is that what some of these asset managers are doing and fund managers is they're actually partnering with local nonprofits. So they're not only giving the investment, but they're trying to improve that community. And so they're partnering with local nonprofits to bring in education around healthcare, to help connect them, with healthy food, and to get medicine, and doctors connected into the community. But then also thinking about COVID, ensuring that those children in the community have access to computers, have what they need to be able to work remotely, and same for parents, but really being able to support that seamless transition. So that's some ways to think about kind of more the solution side. But then, as Kathy was laying out our framework, we can also think about diversity at the asset manager. So Morgan Stanley has an entire team dedicated to this on our manager research team, really increasing the number of diverse owned firms that we partner with. And so thinking about, for less, well, actually, I'll give you a statistic here. Less than 1.5% of assets are managed by diverse owned firms. And I just like to pause there, because I think typically we think diverse, minority, 1.5%, it's small, but is it that small? That's women or racially, ethnically diverse individuals. So that's over half of the population represented there, and yet less than 1.5% of assets. So a huge discrepancy. And so we're intentionally trying to increase the number of diverse owned firms that we partner with and allow, help our clients invest in. But then, we're also looking more deeply at metrics at our asset manager partners. So we launched something called DEI Signal, which is a way to think kind of more holistically about diversity at firms, looking at diverse representation, particularly at senior leadership levels and investment teams, but also policies and procedures to create that more inclusive community. And on the diverse representation side, we're actually using the US Census as a benchmark, saying, if you're not representing the community in which you live and work, maybe you're missing out on a huge pool of talent. And so how do we think about making this more future oriented and making it more aspirational? But those are some of the ways that we look at that data, and I think they're just one of the ranges of approaches that clients or investors can take when thinking about diversity and inclusion in the industry.
I love the concept of your firm, your asset managers being so proactive that they are helping to create partnerships in the community with nonprofits as they are investing in firms that they think have the ability to make a real impact. Can you give me just one precise example of that?
Yeah, happy to. I am originally from Silver Spring, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. And there's a housing project there, affordable housing complex that one of our asset managers invested in. And so, they again made the investment, but then they looked at local nonprofits. And what's great about DC is there are a lot of nonprofits, and really helping to make that connection. Because I think, it's important that the resources are available, but how do you ensure that residents know that they're available? And how do you ensure that those resources are actually getting to the residents? And so helping to be that bridge. And then what's great too is that when they've done that, and once they have those roots in the community, it becomes much easier for them to do it again. And, being, again, just that bridge to help connect the dots. And then thinking about COVID, just one other example, and people lost their jobs, people couldn't pay rent. And so because these asset managers are already thinking about that, and are working with property managers that are thinking about that, those property managers are able to work with residents and even create pools of capital to help those residents who may need support as they're looking for that next opportunity to pay their rent. And so kind of, again, just connecting the dots for those people that are living in the housing complex.
That's fantastic. Kathy, do you have any specific examples that you're familiar with and you would like to share?
No, I think, Emily, that last one was the one I really had been tracking with and seeing recently. Yeah.
I hope that our follow-up content will include some, a link to that or a precise description of that and some of the impact that flows from that. That would be a really interesting case to track. Emily, how do you see the industry continuing to evolve over the next 5 years?
Yeah. So again, just going back to that data point, 99% of millennials, that's the future. I think we're seeing increased demand around this. At the same time, it's becoming mainstream. It's really exciting. I mean, I'm reading about ESG basically daily in the newspaper, and I don't think that was the case, or definitely wasn't the case 5 years ago. So we're definitely seeing increased regulation, which I think is exciting too, because, with increased regulation, we'll hopefully get more, clarity around data and how data is shared by companies, what data is collected by companies. And that will help influence what investors are ultimately able to see and use in making investment decisions. But I see, increased demand. I think more and more we're seeing asset managers come to the table and say ESG is table stakes for them. It's just, it's risks and opportunities. It's not just about doing good, but it's about the bottom line. And it's also what investors care about. I think we've already seen that kind of move in that direction pretty steadily in Europe. And we're starting to see that really tick up in the US as well. So I think more innovation, more demand, and with that, more regulation, which will hopefully create, hopefully go hand in hand with that innovation. That's my one hope.
And Kathy, how will this affect your work in the next 5 years?
Well, I think that it all comes down to education, and I'm seeing more and more people taking more interest that they have capital, they have money, and when they look for ways to deploy it, they're taking more ownership and more interest in doing that. And then instead of just turning it over and blindly investing, people are just saying, look, I'm interested in pursuing these different areas. And by doing that, I think that they can help drive better returns and feel better about their money. I keep driving back to, you have money, you want to make, you have values around your life and your money, and you can find ways to make impact. And we're trying, hopefully, I know with Morgan Stanley, we're trying to make it very transparent and much easier for people to do this. And it's just having conversation with an advisor that is trained in this area and can take you down that path of educating you. And like I said, the 3 I's, you can decide which way you want to pursue this. Most of the time, tippy toe into it, and then you'll be amazed where you'll be 5 years from now.
Money is power, and you are powerful in your educating and guiding. So this is very, the compounding power of what Emily's studying, you're advising, and Morgan Stanley is implementing through its asset managers really gives me hope. For anyone who is interested in learning more about this impact investing space, how do you help them get started?
So I would start by going to our website. You can reach out to us. We have what we call impact investment directors, who are people who are trained in that at Morgan Stanley, including myself. And, I'm supported by this wonderful group of people that have this intellectual capital that we've had 10 years behind us doing this. And so it's just going to lead us down a really good path for our clients. So I think that would be like the first step.
Great. Emily, your recommendation?
Yeah, I would just echo what Kathy said. I think we've shared some resources in the chat. Check out our website and Morgan Stanley Impact Quotient, because I think that's a really great way to start thinking about this and how you can really reflect your values in your portfolio. But I think, to Kathy's point, it's about working with an advisor to better, ensure that you understand what you want to be reflected, and that's actually being reflected in your portfolio. And we have the resources to support you. But knowing what you own, and then looking at how you can align that better over time through tools like Morgan Stanley Impact Quotient.
Okay, fantastic. We promised our audience outstanding tips for maximum impact with their investing. You've given us quite a few, but I wonder if you have anything else you'd like to share.
Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I think just first, again, Sue, thank you so much for having us on this. I think, again, just, I know we've said this a few times, but take a look, see what's in your portfolio. I think that's the first step is, know what you own. And I think it's, again, not just about doing good, but it can be really material to the performance of your portfolio. And so just better understanding what's in there and what those risks and opportunities are, I think, can be great in the long run.
And Susan, that jogs my memory about how we kind of got started on wanting to do this fireside chat. With a few months ago, one of our colleagues did an audio class that we can get on podcasts through Morgan Stanley about the 10 top tips to think about in the area of impact investing. And so that would be also a great place to start. It's a 4-minute audio cast. If you'd like, we'll make sure to get you the contact for that.
We will definitely include that in the article too, summary. And for our audience, a reminder that this video will live online in perpetuity in MIB TV and in YouTube, and that we will soon be crafting our article that references the top line advice you gave us. And we will also include the link to the podcast with 10 more tips. And it will be included in our Better letter, which goes to about 85,000 households now and pushed through our social network. And we encourage everyone who hasn't subscribed to our Better letter to do so, because it is just chock full of great advice that will help make your life and the world a better place too. Kathy and Emily, thank you so much. It has been an honor and a privilege to spend this time with you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
It was great.
And thanks to everybody who joined us.